I want to tell you about the morning everything changed for me. It wasn't a diagnosis. It wasn't an emergency room. It was smaller than that. And honestly, that's what scared me the most. I was standing in my kitchen, reaching up to get a mug from the cabinet, and my arm just hesitated, like it had to think about it first. I stood there for a second, mug in hand, and I thought, when did lifting a coffee cup become something my body had to plan for? Now, here's the thing. I didn't tell anyone about that morning for almost a year. Not my daughter, not my doctor, not even my closest friend. Because saying it out loud felt like admitting something I wasn't ready to admit, that I was getting old. But that little moment in the kitchen sent me down a road I never expected, a road that led me to a retired nutrition researcher in his 80s, sharp as a tack, moving like a man 20 years younger, who told me something that I still think about every single day. He said the difference between the people who decline quickly after 60 and the people who stay vibrant into their 90s often comes down to something sitting right in their kitchen. Something most of us walk past every single day without a second thought. I'm going to share exactly what he told me. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand the 7 foods that showed up, again and again, in the lives of the people who aged the slowest, thought the clearest, and felt the strongest, well into their 80s and 90s. Stay with me, because number 4 surprised even me. And number 6 is probably sitting in your pantry right now, doing absolutely nothing for you the way it's currently prepared. Let's get into it. Before we start, please consider subscribing to the channel so we can deliver more interesting videos to you. My name is Margaret. I'm 68 years old, and I spent the better part of the last decade learning, really learning, what it means to grow older with grace instead of fear. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nutritionist with letters after my name. I'm simply a woman who got scared enough in her own kitchen to start asking better questions, and who has spent years since then talking to researchers, reading the studies most people never see, and testing these changes in my own life. If you're watching this video, I suspect you're a lot like me. You're not looking for miracles. You're looking for the truth. Plainly spoken, from someone who understands exactly where you're standing right now. Here's something nobody tells you when you turn 60. Nobody hands you a manual. You just wake up one day, and your body starts speaking a different language than it used to. Let me explain what's actually happening, because understanding this changes everything about how you'll listen to the rest of this video. Starting somewhere in our 40s, and accelerating quite a bit after 60, our bodies begin losing muscle at a rate of roughly 1 to 2% every single year. Doctors call this sarcopenia. I call it the quiet thief, because it doesn't announce itself. It just tiptoes in and takes a little bit more each year, until one day you're the person hesitating over a coffee mug. At the same time, something else is happening beneath the surface. Something researchers call inflammaging. It's a clunky word, I know, but the idea is simple. As we age, low-grade inflammation builds up in the body like sediment at the bottom of a river. You don't see it. You don't feel it directly. But it's there, and it's connected to nearly every condition we associate with old age. Joint pain, memory decline, heart trouble, even the wrinkles we see in the mirror. Now here's the part that gives me hope, and the part I want you to really sit with. This isn't a one-way street. Your body isn't simply falling apart on a schedule you can't control. The food you put on your plate 3 times a day is either feeding that quiet thief, or it's standing guard against it. Think of your body like an old wooden house. Left alone, weather and time will wear it down. But a house that's maintained, repainted, resealed, the foundation checked, can stand for 100 years and still be beautiful. Food is your maintenance crew, and most of us have been letting the crew skip half their shifts. That researcher I mentioned earlier, His name was Kevin, and I'll tell you more about him as we go. He put it to me this way. He said, "Margaret, your cells don't care how old your birth certificate says you are. They care what you fed them this morning." That line changed something in me, and it's why I went looking for exactly which foods were doing the heaviest lifting. I found 7. Let's start with the one that surprised me the most in terms of just how much it mattered. Let me take you back to Kevin for a moment, because this first food is the one he talked about with more passion than almost anything else. Kevin had a rule he followed for over 30 years. Every single day, without exception, he ate a palm-sized portion of slow-cooked protein, usually wild salmon, sometimes chicken, occasionally lean bison. And he told me the reason wasn't about weight, or vanity, or anything you'd expect. It was about staying upright, literally. Here's the thing about muscle loss that most people don't realize until it's too late. It's not really about how you look in a mirror. It's about whether you can get up off the floor if you fall. It's about whether you can carry your own groceries at 85. It's about whether a hip fracture becomes a minor setback or the beginning of the end. Study after study has linked preserved muscle mass in older adults to lower rates of falls, faster recovery from illness, and yes, longer life overall. And the way you rebuild and preserve that muscle, especially past 60, is through consistent, high-quality protein. But not just any protein, and not cooked just any way. This is where the slow-grilled part matters more than people think. When protein is cooked at very high heat, think charred, blackened, deep-fried, it produces compounds called advanced glycation end products. Try saying that 5 times fast. Researchers just call them AGEs, which is almost a cruel little joke, because these compounds actually accelerate the aging process inside your body. They stiffen your tissues from the inside, a little like how a rubber band left in the sun gets brittle and cracks. Slow, gentle cooking, grilling low and slow, baking, poaching, keeps those compounds to a minimum, while still giving you that satisfying, savory flavor we all crave. Now let's talk about why wild salmon specifically earns its spot at the top of this list. Wild salmon carries a rich supply of omega-3 fatty acids, the same fats your brain is practically begging for as you age. Your brain, believe it or not, is nearly 60% fat by dry weight, and omega-3s are a major building block of the walls of your brain cells. Populations who eat fatty fish regularly tend to show slower rates of cognitive decline compared to those who rarely do. Chicken, especially the thigh and leg meat cooked slowly, brings something different to the table. It's gentler on aging digestive systems while still delivering the amino acids your muscles need to rebuild each day. And lean bison, which not everyone thinks to try, is often lower in the type of saturated fat found in conventional beef, while still delivering iron and B12, 2 nutrients that become harder for older bodies to absorb efficiently from food. Let me tell you a quick story about a woman named Dolores, who I met at a community center talk I gave last year. Dolores was 79 and told me, in front of the whole room, that she'd stopped eating meat almost entirely in her 60s because she'd heard it was bad for aging. She switched almost entirely to soft carbohydrates, breads, pastas, the easy stuff. Within a few years, she noticed she couldn't open jars anymore. She needed her son to carry things she used to carry herself. When she finally added slow-cooked protein back into her daily routine, real, deliberate portions, not huge, just consistent, she told me that within 4 months she opened a pickle jar by herself for the first time in 3 years. She cried telling me that story. I nearly cried hearing it. Here's the shocking part I promised you. Research following older adults has found that those who consistently undereat protein are significantly more likely to become frail. And frailty, once it takes hold, is one of the strongest predictors of hospitalization and loss of independence in the years that follow. This isn't a small detail. This might be one of the single most important changes you make after watching this video. So here's the practical piece. Aim for a portion about the size of your palm, at least once, ideally twice a day. Cook it low and slow, a gentle grill, a covered bake, a poach in broth. Season it well, because there's no rule that healthy has to be bland. And honestly, food that tastes like punishment never lasts. Life's too short for that, and frankly, so is patience. Now let's talk about something small, sweet, and, I promise you, mighty. Berries. I remember Kevin telling me, Margaret, if nature wanted to hand you a pill for your brain, it would look exactly like a blueberry. I laughed at the time. I don't laugh anymore, because the research backs him up more than I expected. Berries, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries are loaded with compounds called anthocyanins, which give them that deep, jewel-toned color. Those same compounds have been studied for their ability to reduce oxidative stress in the brain, essentially acting like a broom sweeping up cellular debris before it causes damage. Here's a study that stuck with me. Research out of Harvard following women in their 60s and older found that those who ate more berries experienced measurably slower rates of cognitive decline over time compared to those who ate few or none. The difference was estimated to be as much as 2.5 years of delayed brain aging. 2.5 years. Think about what 2.5 more sharp, clear years could mean. Watching another grandchild graduate. Remembering the name of the nurse who's been kind to you. Recognizing your own street on the way home. Let me tell you about my neighbor Frank. Frank is 81, and every single morning without fail, he has a small bowl of mixed berries with his breakfast. He calls it his memory bowl. He told me once, half joking, half serious, Margaret, I don't remember when I started this, but I remember everything since. We both laughed, but there was truth buried in that joke. Now here's something that might genuinely shock you. Frozen berries are often just as nutritious, sometimes even more so, than fresh ones sitting in the grocery store for a week. Berries are typically frozen within hours of picking, locking in nutrients at their peak, while fresh berries may have traveled for days, slowly losing potency the whole way. So don't let the frozen bag intimidate you. It's not a lesser choice. It might actually be the smarter one. Berries do something else worth mentioning. They're relatively low in natural sugar compared to many other fruits, and they're rich in fiber, which slows down how quickly that sugar enters your bloodstream. That matters more as we age, because our bodies become less efficient at managing blood sugar spikes, and those spikes are linked to accelerated aging in blood vessels, the very vessels that keep blood and oxygen flowing to your brain and heart. Think of berries like tiny insurance policies. Small, inexpensive, easy to overlook, until you realize just how much protection they were quietly providing all along. A handful a day, on cereal, in yogurt, or just by themselves, is enough. You don't need a mountain of them, you need consistency. If you are enjoying the video, please subscribe to the channel. It helps a lot, so we can continue to create interesting videos. Let's talk about the food most of us were forced to eat as children, and secretly hated, dark leafy greens. Spinach, kale, collard greens, Swiss chard. Here's the thing, our mothers were onto something, even if they couldn't explain the science behind it. Dark leafy greens are extraordinarily rich in a nutrient called vitamin K1, along with folate, lutein, and nitrates. And each of these plays a specific, almost surgical role in slowing the aging process. Let's start with vitamin K. Most people think of it, if they think of it at all, as something related to blood clotting. But past 60, vitamin K takes on a second job. helping direct calcium to where it belongs, in your bones, and away from where it doesn't belong, like your arteries. Researchers have found that populations with higher vitamin K intake tend to show less arterial calcification, essentially softer, more flexible blood vessels, which is directly tied to lower risk of heart disease. Then there's lutein, a compound concentrated in your eyes. As we age, our risk of macular degeneration, the leading cause of vision loss in older adults, climbs steadily. Diets rich in lutein-containing greens have been associated with meaningfully lower rates of this condition. Put simply, the greens you eat today may be the reason you can still read your grandchild's handwriting at 85. And the nitrates found in greens like spinach convert in your body into nitric oxide, a compound that helps blood vessels relax and widen. This isn't a small mechanism, it's the same pathway that certain heart medications work through. Nature simply got there first. I want to tell you about a woman named Ruth. I interviewed for one of my earlier videos. Ruth is 86, and she still walks 2 miles every morning, rain or shine. When I asked her secret, she didn't say vitamins, she didn't say supplements. She said, "Margaret, I've eaten spinach or kale with my dinner every single night since 1974. I don't know the chemistry. I just know I feel like myself when I do it, and I don't when I don't." That's the thing about this generation of research. Science is finally catching up to explain what our grandmothers and great-grandmothers seem to intuitively understand. Eat the green thing. Every day. It matters more than we gave it credit for. Now, a practical note, because I know raw kale salads aren't everyone's idea of a good time, and frankly, they're not mine either most days. Lightly sautéing your greens in a little olive oil, or wilting them into a soup, actually increases the availability of certain nutrients while remaining gentle on digestion, which becomes more important as we age. You don't need to suffer through a bitter raw salad to get the benefits. A warm, comforting bowl of sautéed greens with garlic can do the job beautifully, and taste like something you'd actually look forward to. Aim for a serving daily. Not a mountain, just consistency. The same quiet drumbeat, day after day. Now, before we move to food number 4, I want to pause here for just a moment. Because I know some of you might be thinking, "Margaret, this is a lot of changes." And you're right. It is. But here's what Kevin told me that I've never forgotten. He said, "You don't need to fix your whole plate tomorrow morning. You need to fix one bite at a time and let the momentum carry you." Small, steady changes, repeated for years, are what separate the people thriving at 90 from those who aren't. Not perfection, not extremes, just consistency. All right, let's keep going, because food number 4 might be the one you least expect. I promised you earlier that this one would surprise you, and I meant it. Because for years, nuts had a reputation problem. High in fat, high in calories, the kind of thing well-meaning people avoided because they thought fat meant weight gain and heart trouble. It turns out that reputation was almost entirely undeserved. Let's take these one at a time, because each nut plays a slightly different, almost specialized role. Almonds are rich in vitamin E, an antioxidant that has been closely studied for its relationship to skin health and cellular protection. But more importantly for those of us past 60, almonds also provide magnesium, a mineral involved in over 300 processes in your body, including muscle function, nerve signaling, and even sleep quality. And here's something worth knowing. Magnesium deficiency becomes increasingly common as we age, partly because our kidneys become less efficient at retaining it. Many people who struggle with restless nights or muscle cramps in their later years may simply be running low on this one overlooked mineral. Brazil nuts are almost absurdly concentrated in selenium. So concentrated, in fact, that just 1 or 2 a day can meet your entire daily need. Selenium plays a critical role in thyroid function, and acts as a building block for one of your body's most powerful internal antioxidants, glutathione. Thyroid issues become more common with age, particularly in women, and many people never connect fatigue, brain fog, or weight changes back to this quiet, underlying cause. And then there are walnuts, which interestingly are shaped almost like a small brain, and it turns out that's not just a coincidence nature seems to enjoy. Walnuts are the richest common nut source of plant-based omega-3 fatty acids, and multiple studies have linked regular walnut consumption to improved markers of brain health in older adults. Let me tell you about a man named Harold, 83 years old, who came up to me after a talk I gave at a senior living community. He told me his doctor had recommended a small daily handful of mixed nuts 2 years earlier, after his cholesterol numbers came back concerning. Harold was skeptical, he said, and I quote almost exactly, "Margaret, my whole life I was told nuts were fattening. Why would I start eating more fat at 81? But he tried it. 18 months later, his cholesterol had improved enough that his doctor reduced his medication dosage. He looked at me and said, "I don't understand the science, but I understand my lab results, and those don't lie." Here's the important caveat because I promised you honesty over hype. Nuts are calorie dense and portion does matter. We're talking about a small handful, roughly a quarter cup, not an entire bowl in front of the television. And they should be raw or dry roasted, not the heavily salted, oil-fried versions that line most grocery store shelves, because those preparations can undo much of the benefit. Think of nuts like a small, dense battery. A tiny amount holds an enormous amount of stored energy and nutrients. You just don't need to eat a truckload to get the charge. Now let's talk about a colorful combination that frankly looks beautiful on a plate before it ever does a single thing for your body. Beets, red peppers, tomatoes, and ginger, gently roasted or steamed at low temperatures. I want to explain the low temperature part first, because it's not just a cooking preference, it's actually the key to unlocking what these vegetables offer. High heat, especially frying or aggressive roasting, can destroy a meaningful percentage of certain heat-sensitive nutrients, particularly vitamin C, and some of the delicate antioxidant compounds found in these vegetables. Low and slow cooking. Think gentle roasting at moderate temperatures, or light steaming, preserves far more of what makes these vegetables worth eating in the first place. Let's start with beets. Beets are one of the richest natural sources of dietary nitrates, similar to what we discussed with leafy greens, and they've been specifically studied for their impact on blood pressure and blood flow, including blood flow to the brain. There's something almost poetic about a root vegetable, grown deep in the earth, being so directly linked to keeping blood moving efficiently through your body at the surface. Red peppers bring an extraordinary amount of vitamin C, often more, ounce for ounce, than an orange, which surprises most people. Vitamin C isn't just about avoiding a cold, it's essential for collagen production, the very protein that keeps your skin, joints, and blood vessel walls resilient. As collagen production naturally declines with age, dietary vitamin C becomes one of the few tools left to help support what your body can no longer manufacture as efficiently on its own. Tomatoes, particularly when very lightly cooked, release more of a compound called lycopene, which has been studied extensively for its relationship to heart health and its protective role against oxidative damage in cells. Interestingly, this is one of the rare cases where a little cooking actually improves nutrient availability rather than destroying it, which is why a warm tomato dish often serves you better than a cold raw slice. And ginger, the quiet powerhouse of this group, has been used for centuries, long before modern laboratories existed, for its effect on inflammation and digestion. Modern research has begun to explain what older traditions understood instinctively. Certain compounds in ginger appear to calm inflammatory pathways in the body, the very same pathways connected to that inflammaging process we discussed earlier. I think of this vegetable medley like a small support team, each member specializing in a different job. One manages blood flow, one rebuilds structure, one protects cells, one calms inflammation, working together on your behalf. Every time you sit down to eat. A simple approach. Toss beets, peppers, and tomato wedges with a little olive oil and fresh grated ginger. Roast at a moderate, gentle temperature until just tender, and serve as a side with your protein. It's simple, it's beautiful on the plate, and it's doing far more work than its humble appearance suggests. Now here's the one I mentioned at the very beginning. The one that might be sitting in your fridge right now. Misunderstood and underused. Eggs. For decades, eggs were treated almost like a forbidden food for anyone worried about heart health, largely because of their cholesterol content. But here's something important that more recent, larger studies have clarified. For most healthy older adults, dietary cholesterol from eggs has a far smaller effect on blood cholesterol than scientists once believed. The conversation has shifted considerably, and eggs have largely been welcomed back to the table by many nutrition researchers. And what eggs offer in return is remarkable for their size. They contain choline, a nutrient directly involved in brain function and memory, and one that a significant percentage of adults, especially older adults, simply don't get enough of. They also provide a form of vitamin D, lutein and zeaxanthin for eye health, and high-quality, easily digestible protein in a form that's gentle on aging digestive systems. I think about eggs almost like a tiny, complete toolkit. Small, unassuming, inexpensive, yet packed with nearly everything needed for a specific job. You don't need 6 different supplements when a couple of eggs are quietly doing overlapping work in a single bite. I recall a woman, Anita, 74 years old, who told me she'd avoided eggs for over 20 years because of something she'd read decades ago. When her doctor reviewed her diet and gently pointed out she was likely choline and protein deficient, she reintroduced eggs a few times a week. She told me later that her energy in the mornings noticeably improved within about a month, something she hadn't expected from something so simple. The preparation matters here too. Gently scrambled, soft-boiled, or poached preserves more of the nutrient quality than eggs fried at high heat in excessive oil. Simple is often better here, and thankfully, simple is also easier on a Tuesday morning when you don't feel like fussing in the kitchen. And now, the food I've saved for last, because I know it's the one that will make some of you smile. Dark chocolate, or pure cocoa. Yes. You read that correctly. This is not a trick, and it's not an excuse to raid the candy aisle. We're talking specifically about dark chocolate, with a high cocoa content, ideally 70% or greater, or unsweetened cocoa powder, not the sugary milk chocolate bars lining the checkout line. Dark chocolate and cocoa are rich in flavonoids, plant compounds that have been studied for their relationship to blood vessel flexibility and blood flow, including blood flow to the brain. Some research has even linked regular, moderate consumption of high flavonoid cocoa to improved markers of cognitive function in older adults over time. Kevin, of all people, was the one who introduced me to this. He kept a small piece of dark chocolate in his desk drawer every single day of his life, as far back as I can remember him telling me. He called it his one small joy with a side benefit, and I've always loved that description, because it captures something important. This isn't about deprivation. A little genuine pleasure, in moderation, is part of a life worth living, and in this rare case, that pleasure happens to come with real benefits attached. The key word, of course, is moderation. We're talking about a small square or two, a few times a week, not an entire bar in one sitting. And the higher the cocoa percentage, generally, the more of these beneficial compounds you're getting, and the less sugar you're taking on board. Think of it like a small reward built directly into your health routine. Proof that occasionally, the thing that feels indulgent and the thing that's good for you can be exactly the same thing. Let me bring you back one last time to that kitchen. The one where I stood frozen, mug in hand, wondering when my own body had started hesitating. I wish I could tell you I fixed everything overnight. I didn't. But I can tell you this. 2 years after that morning, I reached for that same mug, on that same shelf, without a second thought. Not because I became a different person, because I started feeding the person I already was, a little more thoughtfully, one small bite at a time. Kevin passed away last spring, at the age of 89, sharp-minded until the very end, still walking his dog every morning, still keeping that little square of dark chocolate in his drawer. I think about him often. I think about how much he gave me, not in the form of miracle cures, but in the form of patience, consistency, and quiet, ordinary food, prepared with a little bit of care. 7 foods: slow-grilled protein, berries, dark leafy greens, raw nuts, a low-temperature vegetable medley, eggs, and dark chocolate. None of them exotic, none of them expensive, all of them sitting quietly in ordinary grocery stores, waiting for someone to finally pay attention. If this video meant something to you today, I'd love for you to subscribe so you don't miss the next story, and tell me in the comments which of these 7 foods you're going to start with this week. Take care of yourself out there. You've earned more good years than you might think, and it might just start with what's on your plate tonight. Have a blessed afternoon.